The ideas expressed in the Akron Roundtable Signature Series are those of the speakers and not of the Akron Roundtable, its partners, or sponsors.
My name is Curtis Mincher Jr. I'm the president of Akron Roundtable and senior fellow of Third Space Action Lab out of Cleveland, Ohio. At this time, I would like to invite Jim Emanuel. He is the U.S. Foods Senior Territory Manager and our program sponsor for today. And so we are grateful for their support. Let's receive him with a round of applause.
Every time I come to an Akron Roundtable, it's beautiful to see people across a lot of the art from my connections with Miller South and Firestone, and then obviously all the restaurant and food people. So it's beautiful. But all right, our guest speaker today is a chef whose work has helped put Northeast Ohio on the national culinary map. Akron native Vinny Cimino is the chef and co-owner of Cordelia and Rosie in Cleveland, a recent James Beard Award finalist and one of Food & Wine's best new chefs. As someone who spends a lot of time with restaurant operators across our region, I've seen firsthand how important that strong hospitality leadership can be. And that's one reason I'm especially pleased to introduce today's speaker. His approach to cooking is rooted in hospitality, sustainability, and a deep commitment to supporting local farmers and producers throughout our region. Just as important, he's built a reputation for putting people first, something that resonates deeply in our industry, where culture, community, and the well-being of our teams matter more than ever. From his Akron roots to his recent collaboration with another Ho-Town favorite, Swenson's, Vinny's become a respected voice for the future of hospitality and an outstanding ambassador for our region. Please join me in welcoming Chef Vinny Cimino.
I'm Jason Horinger. I own a business here in Akron called Birchwood Supply. That's how Vinny and I first met each other about 10 years ago. I made a dining room table for him and his wife, Sarah.
Two.
Yeah, the new one now for the new house.
Yeah.
So we're just going to do a bit of a back and forth. Vinny and I go way back. I have some specific questions. A lot of these are personally based because these are things that I like to know from his perspective. But I think all of us in some way, shape, or form will gravitate towards it. But first, in line with your introduction in regards to community and hospitality, I want to start with this. Kurt Vonnegut. I once told my wife I was going to go out and buy an envelope. Oh, she said, well, you're not a poor man. Why don't you go online and buy 100 envelopes and put them in the closet? And so I pretended not to hear her and went out to get an envelope. I meet a lot of good people and see some great looking babies, and a fire engine goes by. And I give a thumbs up, and I'll ask a woman what kind of dog that is. And I don't know. The moral of the story is we're here on Earth to fart around. Of course, the computers will do us out of that, but what the computer people don't realize, or they don't care, is we're dancing animals. Yes, we love to move around, and it's like we're not supposed to dance at all anymore. I thought that was fitting today as we start. I've seen behind the scenes. I was in your kitchen when you were weighing Cordelia and some other options.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. Not just the idea of the hospitality industry, right? That's a term we know. I've been in the restaurant. I've been in Rosie. I know some of your employees. I know Tony through Instagram, but you and I just had a great conversation as if we knew each other for a long time. And there's something you notice. I see similar faces over 2 years, same employees. I can go give hugs to those people. The same waiter that when I was there on the Friends and Family opening for Cordelia is still there. Same thing with Rosie. There is an investment in your people. There is a buy-in. People just don't go to work. It's a genuine enjoyment of being there. You and Andrew have cultivated this. What about the hospitality industry? And I have a question about this further that we'll get to. Why is it more to you? Why is it more important for you in a lot of ways to take care of your employees, to take care of that community, that environment, cultivating and curating what that experience is for the people that you're in charge of in a lot of ways? Why is that so important?
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's back up to, that initial conversation that you and I were having in my home kitchen as we were outfitting a sink into our countertop, and during the pandemic, trying to figure out what was next in life. And, like you said, I was kind of weighing some options. I had this opportunity to open up Cordelia, and it was a very loose thing. I was in talks with the folks at House 330. I was, weighing if I wanted to open up my own brick and mortar sandwich shop. But in that moment of the pandemic, I was really focusing on the nonprofit that I'd started called Cleveland Family Meal. We're just feeding folks out of work hospitality professionals, really anybody who needed extra help.
Because this is COVID.
This is COVID, yeah.
This is COVID.
Yep, pandemic. So as I realized as the world shut down, as a chef, let me backtrack. Before the world shut down, as a chef, my sole focus was food. That was my job. I had to cook food. How can I cook the best food? Then the pandemic happened, and I realized that if there's no people, there's no food. So my focus really, vastly shifted from the sole purpose of cooking really good food to if I don't have any people, I can't cook any food whatsoever. So the people really became the most important part of that equation. And we started feeding people, and we, started just doing anything we could to help folks out. And that idea of hospitality has kind of snowballed into everything that we do today. We go out of our way to take care of our people because we know without our people, there are no restaurants. My partner Andrew and I, we're two people. Cordelia's 8,000 square feet. It's a big space. In the same way that you talk about raising your children, it takes a village. I mean, it's really what a restaurant is the same thing. It takes a village. And we are very fortunate to surround ourselves with so many wonderful people day in and day out that not only do they help us run the business, but they allow us to continue to provide for others. And it's not just about our guests, but we take great pride in taking care of our people. I think that's where hospitality starts first. You take care of your people will in turn take care of those that they're in charge of taking care of.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like for you guys and what that's become now that Cordelia has become kind of its own thing?
Yeah.
At this point, with what you guys have been recognized for, Rosie's started. What does that look like as far as taking care of your people? What have you been able to provide for your employees as you grow in employees, but also kind of just those basic necessities of life? Because traditionally speaking, from your and I conversation, the hospitality, the restaurant industry, a lot of the times can be very bare bones.
Yeah. Very unforgiving
It's
industry.
very unforgiving as far as wages and tips, and you're kind of just scraping at the bones of a lot of things. But what have you guys been able to do and provide for your employees? What's been a focus that you guys have really tried to push?
So Cordelia will celebrate 4 years in the July, beginning of August. And, the fun thing is that it's, kind of transformed throughout the years of what we wanted it to accomplish, what we wanted to provide. As we open up this restaurant, I'm in the industry, I cook, I never had healthcare. I never had a 401k program. These are things that I wanted to, selfishly, I wanted to have for myself, but I also wanted to be able to provide for others. So we opened up Cordelia, with medical, dental, vision, a matching 401k program. And, you know, as we instilled all these things, we also realized that, like, you know, a lot of I'm 43 years old. You know, most of our staff is either not of the age where they need to be on their own insurance now that it goes to 26, or like it wasn't a priority for them because, you know, they money was basically, you know, they needed to make sure they had enough money to be able to do everything they wanted to do. So as the conversations kept growing with our team, primarily, it was like, what is important to you isn't the same thing that is important to me. Again, I'm 43 years old. I have 3 kids. Like, my goal is like take care of my family long term. Like, you know, for a 23-year-old person, it's not necessarily like they're not worrying about, you know, putting their kids through college. They're worrying about making, different priorities, you know. So we started having conversations with our team and figuring out what, you know, was the most important thing to them, what they wanted to see out of this. We knew we wanted to continue to make our industry a career path and not just a pass through. We wanted to continue to take care of our team better tomorrow than we did today. So and this is about a year in the making. I think it was about a month ago now, we instituted PTO for all of our staff. So both part-time, full-time, everybody has PTO. If you've been with us for a year, you automatically are entitled to 1 week of PTO. And then from there, it's an accrual for as long as you work, how many hours you work a week, you can accrue up to a week of PTO. We also raised our minimum rate of pay across the board to $20 an hour, which, you know, was something that we really wanted to make sure that we were taking care of our people, so then they can in turn take care of their people. So, you know, it's one of those things like, you know, our dishwashers make $20 an hour. Some of our line cooks make $20 an hour. I go to our line cooks, like, do you want to wash dishes? I said, no. Okay, easy peasy. Like, nobody bats an eye kind of thing. But the goal is to continue to take care of folks better tomorrow than we do today. We also have been very, we've been able to implement some extra mental health benefits for our team as well, which has been very, very helpful for all of us, honestly. And then, you know, we just opened up Rosie. It's been about 4 months now.
Yeah.
You know, so from there, it's a little bit different. We can't do PTO for everybody there just because it's a brand new restaurant and it's got some debt to pay off. But we still do a matching 401k program, still do all of our mental health, medical, dental, vision implementations. So our goal for there is to continue to be able to provide more, like we did at Cordelia, and to continue to take care of people the best way that we can.
Yeah. And my brain's going in 20 different directions right now. So we're bridging off, and I want to touch on a couple things, but the first, kind of building on it, taking care of your people. You're kind of spitting in the face of convention in the restaurant industry at this point, in a lot of ways, because of what you came up with, what you and I have talked about, how you're treating people, minimum base pay, 401k, time off, not working people till, you know, to the point that they want to quit. There's this idea, and we all experience it in our own way, in our own industry. This is the way it's always been done. That's a hard convention to fight against.
Yep.
You and I've talked about this over the years, and what you came up with, you've been very intentional of going in the opposite direction of it and wanting to take care of people, and knowing beating people down or just working people silly hours and doing all of those things is not a way to foster any bit of community. So it comes back to that. But what have you found 4 years now, 2 restaurants in, who knows what's going to come next? You and Andrew do, but nobody else does. What does that look like, bucking the trend of this is the way it's always been done? You know, line cooks, dishwashers are a dime a dozen. You just get younger guys coming in, but fostering a community is hard.
Yeah, you know, we put all of our investment back into our spaces and our people. You know, the thought and theory, at least for us, is that, you know, we're hoping to build something that is sustainable for a long time to come. We want to continue to provide for for those folks. We want them to, in turn, what they do basically is they take great gratitude in the opportunities that they have. Our folks are happy to come to work. There's smiles on their faces. We just got back from Chicago last weekend for the James Beard Awards, where we had 52 people with us. Like we bought a bunch of tickets to the awards. Don't get me wrong, which was always a great thing to do.
That's not 52 just friends and that's 52 of your employees.
Yeah.
Those are employees. It's not just Sarah, friends, family, etc.
Yeah.
Like the last 2 years you guys have done this, like you take everybody. You
many
take your
people-
employees to
yeah.
the award ceremonies.
There's many people who want to come. And so, like I said, we bought a bunch of seats at the awards for all of our management team, our partners, everything. And, everybody else is like, we want to come too. So they come on their own volition. They spend their own money to come to Chicago, to, stay in hotels, to drive, to fly, to take the train. I hear you. I don't recommend the train. I didn't do the train. But for the sheer fact that they just want to be there and support, it's like such an incredible thing. So, from there we make sure we acknowledge that support. We took our management team out to dinner. After dinner, we all met up at a bar and celebrated one another and toasted the fact that we were in Chicago. After the awards were over, we went back out again, and just being around everybody in that atmosphere. This is where you see every day, but it's different because you're in a different town doing something different. It's not a work function. It's just people hanging out because they want to be around one another. And to be able to have that in a restaurant is something truly special. I mean, like I said, 52 people in Chicago is wild.
Yeah.
It really is. And we took a picture 2 years ago when we were finalists, and I think there were 17 people in this photo. And we're like, this is a big crew. And then we compared it
I love seeing that
to
photo,
this
but,
year.
yeah.
And it was from where the window of the storefront was, we were like this. And then all of a sudden we're like this. And it's just so cool. It's so cool to see our team grow. It's so cool to see our team being able to do the things that they want to do, to be a part of the things. And it's special for us to be able to share it with them. I mean, that's, we didn't win the award. But we won in, who we are and our team and our hospitality. The fact that we got to share with all of them and be there in Chicago with all of those folks, that's the real win for us. To come back reinvigorated, to be able to share with our people, our team, our community, our city, all of those things matter way more than the medal does.
And that's interesting because in thinking about this and what you've built and how this goes, there's this idea of celebrity, and you're kind of moving into that. It is what it is. I'm not focusing on that.
Yeah.
But you've been now, because of this, international.
Mhm.
You've been all over the place. Been all over the place in the United States, Europe. But knowing you like I know you, as Tony knows you, as those of us around, you do all of those things and you connect with these chefs and you're with all of these people. So that's reinvigorating in one way.
Mhm.
How does that stretching beyond what is immediately around you, how does that fill you up, bringing it back to what's immediately around you? With Northeast Ohio, with Akron, with Cleveland, with your community, focusing on your people. All of those opportunities are great and you grow and you build. But knowing you and knowing what your focus has always been, it's never to keep, those are great opportunities. And that's a question that I want to get to here in a little bit. But I know you bring that back to your immediate surroundings. What's that experience been like for you?
Well, I will tell you the first thing when I tell anybody where I'm from, everybody says, oh, LeBron James. Said 100%. I will take that all day long. And then I, in turn, tell them, technically I was the original kid from Akron because I'm a year older than he is. So, semantics, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, what I really appreciate is the fact that I get the opportunity to showcase Northeast Ohio. Not everybody understands, how great it is to live here, to be a part of this community, to do what we do, where we do it. And it's only to the last couple of years that we've found that both Akron and Cleveland area are finally like the density of population is growing, which is huge. For 50 years, it's been depleting and people have been leaving and going to other cities. Now people are realizing finally that they don't have to leave to find what they want. It's in their backyard. We have Michelin coming to Cleveland sometime next year. I mean, the amount of cooks and chefs that I've spoken to over the past 6 months who now were in bigger cities or wanting to come home because they were looking for something they couldn't find in their backyard. Now they can, they're like, all right, how do I come back? Where do I go? What do I need to do? That's special to be able to go out to all these different cities and to represent, Northeast Ohio is, to me, is a great honor. I love hyping up Cleveland, Akron, talking about who we are, what we do. It's really something special, and people just don't understand. Like I talk to chefs out of Florida or California, these places that you think are like really nice. Their growing seasons are like so much shorter than ours are. I'm like, oh yeah, we get tomatoes for like 7 weeks. They're like, we get tomatoes for like 4 days. I'm like, that's cool. We get peas for 2.5 weeks out of the year, and people are like, we don't even get peas anywhere. So being able to like tell people about who we are and what we do and how we celebrate these ingredients, these farmers, the people who help provide for us, like it's a whole different world, and people just don't understand it. And then they get excited about like, oh, I got to come to Cleveland. I got to come and see what you guys are doing. I got to come and eat the food that's there because, they don't have what we have. And it's, as we think like, oh yeah, maybe we have, winter, 11 under the 12 months of a year kind of thing. They have nice weather most of the time. It's really us who are so fortunate to be where we are with how much stuff does grow in our backyard and how much, we get to celebrate it. Like, you're in California, you're gonna eat a tomato all year round. Is it gonna be a good tomato? It's probably gonna be pretty darn good if you're in California. But in Ohio, we get tomatoes for those 6-7 weeks. Like, we're gonna celebrate the hell out of those tomatoes for those 6 or 7 weeks. I'm gonna eat a tomato every single darn day. My daughter's probably eating them like an apple kind of thing. Like, that's just kind of what we do. And then when the next season happens, we celebrate those things. And we celebrate them so hard because we know that, until next year, we're not going to see them again, really. We can get them in the store and, go to Whole Foods or Acme and find them. And they're going to be California grown tomatoes that have been shipped to us in a refrigerated container, and they're fine. They have sustenance and nourishment to an extent, but like what comes out of your backyard and what's grown like out of the soil in Northeast Ohio is like just something so special to it. I'm going to go down to the Zalays here in a couple of weeks and literally fill up my Subaru with corn and take it up to the restaurants, and I'll do that once a week for 6-7 weeks, and I'll get probably 8 to 12 bags of corn every single week and just take it up to all the restaurants because it's it's the best darn corn there is.
What do you see in your intentionality with Cordelia, with Rosie, just with what you've done? You're obviously in downtown Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you cut your teeth. You did that for years. We'll get into kind of how you came up. We'll get to that question. I'm born and raised Akron. You and I both.
Yeah.
We're both small business owners. Akron has its challenges. Some very glaring challenges, but also myself, and I think you as well, we're eternal optimists. Like, there's a reason why we're both still here. And we know plenty of people that have cut and run and gone to bigger cities and gone to bigger markets, and it's easier too, and it makes things a lot easier. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the advantages you see? One, with Akron creating a sustainable, an exciting place for food. What are some of those challenges and what are some of those advantages you might see?
Well, like I said, for the first time in a long time, Akron, as the New York Times just came out, like it's a growing population. People are now discovering some of these, mid-major cities, some of these old cities that people are finally coming back to and realizing like they're getting out of these larger metropolitan dense areas and finding better quality of life in cities like Akron, cities like Cleveland. Um, I think that as our density continues to grow, like the opportunities for small business will continue to grow. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, throughout my time. And even like, we have 2 restaurants, both in Cleveland. One of them is downtown Cleveland on East 4th Street, the heart of everything. It's busy all the time. We open up another restaurant, Rosie, a mile away across the bridge in Ohio City, Hingetown area. And it's busy. It's a much smaller restaurant, so it stays busy in a different way. But like just being 1 mile away over a bridge downtown, like it is completely night and day for what for what it does.
Yeah.
So like just having more of that community around, like will continue to drive and support more folks.
Yeah.
And I think that as small business and people, like we all tend to band together. We find inspiration in one another, and which continues to push us to do more, to want to provide more for our communities, to different opportunities and whatnot. So yeah.
This is a question I've wanted to ask for a long time. Something that you and I talk about, something I admire about you, the people that are around you. From my perspective, this is just me personally. When I'm looking at design work, when I'm thinking about stuff for the shop, I want nothing to do with people that are in my industry, right? That's just my non-traditional way of how I came up. Self-taught, a lot of those things. You are constantly around chefs. You are with a group of people. You are doing these things at festivals, at any number of events, right? So naturally, there's a lot of overlap. What other parts of culture, what other parts do you fill up with your creativity? Is it constantly talking to chefs? What other parts do you tap into where you might be thinking about a dish creatively, but you've pulled from an entirely different part of culture, right? You may have looked at an artist differently and thought that translates to the plate. Where do you fill up? What do you get? Where do you go back to that well sometimes?
I think creativity is it's never black and white. It's always in color. I think that you find creativity in so many different ways. Like, I get inspired by, my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
I get inspired by, going around to other restaurants, seeing other cities. There's so many things out there that, by the farms, by the ingredients,
Yeah.
by just, anything and everything, being here, being able to talk to all of you, like, this will continue to drive me to do more. I mean, that's kind of where it all lies in. It's not like one simple thing. It's so many, my brain just doesn't stop. So it just keeps pulling in things from different places.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Speaking of her, I want to give Sarah her flowers. Like,
Yeah. I think she's here now.
where's she
Hi.
at? Hi.
She's getting with all the kids in the back.
Yes. Sarah, I have a paragraph here for you, just so you know.
I know both of you. We've shared meals. Our kids are close to the same age. This is hard. This is really hard in a relationship, and not
Harder
only
for her too. Yeah.
and that's in that in a marriage, in a relationship, just the normal things in life are hard enough on top of what Cordelia and Rosie have become, and the time constraints and the responsibilities. So there's this balance, and we talked about this a little while ago, but I've thought a lot about it. Where do you two balance and understand? Like, it's a weird juxtaposition because the train can leave the station and it's never coming back. Like you could add on more and more and more and more. It's very easy to, because people are always going to want to. They're always going to want a piece of chef, right? Because of what you do and in the team you've created. Where's the value for you now in your 40s with what a no means, pertaining to the kids, pertaining to Sarah, pertaining to the life you go home to that not a lot of people see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then how do you two continually find ways to be creative, to allow things, to allow that relationship for the two of you to not get carried away because there's this persona and public piece, but you have a family, which I know is of the utmost importance to you, right?
Yeah, and
That's a lot, so
it's
take
a lot,
whatever you
of
want.
course. My family will always be the most important part of anything that I do. I think that the reason I push myself so hard is because I want to show my children what things are possible.
Yeah.
I want to be able to provide more for them that I was given the ability to have. I want to ultimately make them proud. I want to show them that if you do good, if you're good people, you work hard, like good things can happen. It is a juxtaposition. It is always an ups and downs. It's not always easy, but that will always be my end goal, is to make sure that my children know what the possibilities are. That everything I do is trying to be better for them and for our communities, because I think that, again, people are the most important part of everything that we have. Now, I will say that I'm still figuring out how to say no. I've said it, I think, twice.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of yeses, let me tell you. My wife can attest. I have traveled, I believe in June alone, I believe it'll be 18 days I've been gone. So a lot of very good opportunities. But it's also 18 days that I'm not home with my family, so it's something that I definitely am very aware of. And in this moment right now, like, I'm taking advantage of these opportunities, but I'm also very aware that, I need to make it to softball games. And I want to be there for t-ball games. And, I'm finally getting to at least a moderate point of the restaurants I trust wholeheartedly on their own. So now that allows me to think about, like, all right, my daughter's got a softball game. I can go to the softball game and not have to worry about what's going on at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And, trying to do my best to be a better father, a better partner, because, it can't all be about work. And it's definitely hard for me personally, because I do love what I do. I love hospitality. I love cooking. I love sharing stories with others. I love celebrating our farmers. It's more of a hobby than it is a job for me. So it's something that I really truly love doing. But with everything that you do, there's like a relationship, there has to be a balance. So I will tell you that I'm a very flawed person, and I'm constantly working on being a better partner to my wife and a better father to my children, because it's we're in this growth moment of trying to balance it all.
That's the hard thing, where as a small business owner, when you start, regardless of whatever notoriety you start with, whether you're in downtown Cleveland on East 4th, wherever it may be, there comes that point of you have to say yes, you're chasing. Like, you're constantly chasing things. Somewhere along the way, you go from chasing to be the chased.
Mm-hmm.
And I see there's that shift has happened. So I think that
Yeah, that's
is
weird.
wanting to highlight the importance you put, albeit not easy, and it's not always going to be great, and there's going to be a lot of bumps with it. But understanding how, and just getting a little bit of an understanding of how you two continually come back to that with each other.
Yeah, I will tell you that I would not be sitting here or being able to do anything that I do without my wife.
Yeah.
Her support throughout the years has been endless. From the moment that I decided to take she knows way more than I do, but it's like a $20-something thousand a year pay cut to go and work as a sous chef at another restaurant. As we just bought a house and had I think an almost 1-year-old, or maybe a 1-year-old at the time, and she was like, well, if you don't do this, you're kind of dumb. So, which she would know more. She's like, you got to follow your dreams. You're not gonna be happy if you don't do this. So, we'll figure out how to make it all work.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was that moment that, all right, we kind of jumped. We could have just been where we were and did what we did. But she's like, you got to follow your dreams. So I did, and she gave me that opportunity to do that. I started off as a 4th sous chef at the Greenhouse Tavern, making I think it was like $28,000 a year. And I was working 100+ hours a week. But from that moment, I was able to surround myself with people who knew more about food than I did, who pushed me to do better, and I was able to see what what my goals were, I guess. And I wanted to, be continue to be a better chef and a better leader, and do more in that realm. And I was very fortunate that within, I think about 7 months, I got a promotion and was able to, keep building from there and keep growing and doing more and more and more. But again, I talk about it like, we've been sprinting for the last, 4 years since the restaurant's been open. Really, I guess we've been sprinting for, the last 11 years since you started going.
You teed my last question up, by the way.
Yeah.
You just did without knowing it. So last question. We'll get to everybody. I'm going to let everybody jump on you with their audience Q&A. How do you, I'm going to butcher it completely, but there's a story. Denzel Washington, interviewed by a journalist. And he's talking early on in his career, talking about his success. The journalist is assuming Denzel Washington's an overnight success. And his response, I'm sure, was nice, but curt in a lot of ways. He goes, I'm a 20-year overnight success. There's been a lot that's gone into the 4 years of Cordelia. There's been a lot to go into the short time with Rosie. You're in Sarah's relationship, years and years and years. The relationships you cultivated. Do you find it advantageous that with all of this that's come, the award nominations, the best chef, building teams, opening and building restaurants, do you find it advantageous that this hits you in your late 30s, early 40s? That this allowed you to kind of root and ground yourself in some things that you maybe would have grounded yourself in your 20s? Like if this, let's just say you didn't open, let's say you rose real quick as a fourth sous chef. Something happened, boom, 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 boom. It's going to look real different in your 20s than it does now.
Yeah.
So where's that advantageous for you right now where you can ground yourself? Obviously, Sarah, the kids, you have really good people around you. What do you come back to? What grounds you in all of this, in this craziness of the quote unquote celebrity, the notoriety, the awards, all of those things? How are you able to keep a level head? How are you able to kind of come back to those things that are most important to you?
Listen, in my 20s, I was a head line cook, pardon my French.
Hey,
But,
no,
lots of things that, you probably shouldn't be doing as a 20-ish year old. As I talk about my career path, one of my biggest turning moments, I started working at Ken Stewart's Grill in Akron, and some of my fellow colleagues and chefs are here today. Yes, and they were mentors to me. I saw what they were doing, what they were able to do. I wanted to know more and continue to push myself to be better in that realm. Again, I didn't know much. I always was in the mind of I need to put myself in a room with people who know more about food than I do, know more about cooking than I do, know more about something else than I do, because I will forever be a student in any field that I go into, because I really enjoy the learning aspect of it all. And I think it's one of the reasons that cooking and hospitality has been such a big impact in my life, because it's an ever-evolving relationship. We're constantly learning more. We're constantly figuring out how to do it better, growing, doing more things. And it was the moment that, I held my daughter for the first time in my arms and realized that all right, there's more to life than, being a headline cook, so time to kind of really figure out what I wanted to do. And, I was working at Ken Stewart's, and I think I'd worked for Ken for roughly 6 years, I think, somewhere around in there. Started off as a salad cook, eventually built myself up to a sous chef at the Grill, and then went to the East Bank and helped open up the East Bank. And by the time I left that place, I was the executive sous chef, beverage director, assistant manager, you name it. But I had also realized that I couldn't go anywhere else. There was nowhere else for me to go within that company. There were great chefs who were running the grill, running the lodge at the time, and there was a chef above me there who had a stranglehold on that position. So I had to make a move. So that's when I went to work at the Greenhouse Tavern, and it was a place that I knew that I was going to learn a bunch about food, and in a very roundabout way, learned a lot about leadership. And I will tell everybody that there are moments in life that you learn a lot from what not to do, as you do from what to do.
Yeah.
And the Greenhouse was definitely one of those moments of like, they didn't go out of their way to take care of you. They were like, we're better than everybody else. So like, you almost need to pay us to be here in this really roundabout way. Not that we've paid anybody, don't get me wrong. But it was like this, like, we're better. So, you should be lucky that you have this position kind of thing. So, and you worked a lot all the time. You said yes to everything. It chewed up and spit a lot of people out kind of thing. So you learn a lot of who you are from that. And in those moments, like you kind of get sucked into it. Like, my partner, Andrew, I give him some flack for this, not often, but often enough. When he was looking to open up a restaurant, what's turned into Cordelia, I was not his first choice as a partner. I think I was like his fourth choice or something like that. I made the top 5, thank goodness. But one of the reasons that he told me that he didn't reach out to me, first after everybody said that, hey, you should reach out to Vinny, I know he's looking to do something too, was because he knew that I had worked at the Greenhouse Tavern for so long, and I had spent probably 6 years with the Greenhouse Tavern. But because he didn't want to reach out to me, because he knew how toxic that culture was, and what it perpetrated, and then taking advantage of people, not taking care of folks, chewing them up and spitting them out. When we sat down and talked, like, I was like, that culture wasn't me. In those moments, like, I was in just like survival. I was in it. I was trying to figure out how to not get chewed up and spit out. I was, taking notes of like, here's how you should not treat people kind of thing. Which allowed me to really like, focus and invest on the positivity of it all. And like, I did learn a lot. I met a lot of great folks. I still have some really long lasting friendships from that, not because of it, but almost like trauma bonding in between it. And, now we a lot of us stay really connected because we made it out. But everybody who made it out doesn't do anything like we did, like we was done to us back in the day kind of thing. So, we've all made it a point to like, all right, we've been through this. I don't need you to go through this just because I went through this. And I don't care that, that you don't know what I had to go through, because I'm glad that you don't, because I don't want you to have to experience it. I don't want you to have to be, burned with hot tongs, just for the heck of it, or chewed up and spit out just because that was what we had to do back in the day. So our goal is to continue to push forward, to do a better tomorrow, to take care of people better. Like, I don't need you to go through all the hazing rituals or, get yelled at for not cooking something properly. Like, none of those things are positive, clearly. So how we do is we just continue to take care of people better, and to lift them up, and to be the support that we can. And, over the last 4+ years now, like we found it to be very much a recipe for success. As I talked about, we took all these folks to Chicago for the Beards. We're sitting there in the audience, and I believe 6 people who were with us were part of our opening team. Our first back of the house employee, our first front of the house employee, all of our opening managers still with us. Tony's here today, has been with us for 2 years. That's where we pride ourselves on most, is being able to build that network of support, and then give people further opportunities. Like, that first back of house employee that I hired was a line cook who started off in the fry station, who's now one of our sous chefs. You know, that first front of the house employee that Jeffrey and I sat down with and interviewed was a server who's now a manager.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like those things, like we're continuing to able to build them up and give them more opportunity.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that appreciate your ability to want to go buy one envelope instead of 100 and focus on the community around you and pay attention to those people. I'm want to take the time and we'll open it up to the audience Q&A. I'm very proud to call you a friend.
Thank you.
I'm very thankful you asked me to get up on stage with you. I know Akron's very proud of you, as is Sarah and the family and all of those around you. So we'll go ahead and start the audience Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone. John Garfalo, president of Akron Community Foundation and proud member of the Akron Roundtable Board. As you can imagine, Vinny, we have many, many questions revolving around the same topic, and everyone wants to know, when are you coming to Akron, and when can we all experience a Vinny Cimino restaurant here in our area?
I figured nobody was going to ask me this question. I will tell you, it has always been the end goal is to open up something in Akron. Right now yes, thank you. It was one of the things that took me the longest to make a decision about opening up Cordelia in Cleveland, was that I wanted to do something in Akron. But the opportunity in Cleveland was there, and so we took it. But the end goal will eventually to open up something in Akron. When, I don't know, but that will always be the end goal.
Great, thank you. You talked about the changes that you've made with your employees and retaining your employees, like insurance, PTO, $20 minimum, and mental health effects. How has that affected turnover and or call-offs with your organization?
We have great employee retention. Yeah, we really do. We've been very fortunate. You know, I think that's the goal, is to make sure that we continue to have that, because we can give them more opportunities and our business continue to grow.
Great. There are a couple of different questions about how food brings together a community. Can you talk about how important food is to building community?
I mean, I think food is people, you know, from the people who grow it to the people who eat it, who celebrate it, who cook it. You know, it brings us together around a table, around a backyard barbecue. You know, it's just this communal gathering.
Great. We all are glued to TVs watching shows like The Bear. How realistically are shows like that?
Not very realistic.
Good to know. There's a lot of
Lots of hard work. Don't get me wrong. Not very realistic.
A lot of young folks in the audience want to know, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming chef?
Work hard, put your head down, be grateful, ask questions. Yeah.
One of our listeners wants to know, how does one earn a James Beard nomination, and what does that process look like leading up to the award ceremony, since you just experienced it?
A good question. I have no idea. You know, I'm happy to be here and to do it. I'm still kind of flabbergasted as the fact that we were in Chicago last weekend. So I don't know. I just put my head down and I do everything that I can. I try to treat my people better than, you know, I was treated. I try to get back to my communities where I can. And, you know, I'm gonna do the same thing tomorrow as I did yesterday and just gonna keep going with it.
How has being raised in Akron been an influence on your work and on your life?
I came from a big Italian family. We celebrated a lot of events around food. And I think that part of that has always been with me. You know, my grandmother had a restaurant in Kent when I was growing up. Here I would serve beers to regulars and wash dishes, kind of thing. So I think being around this industry and people and always celebrating around food, like, has just snowballed into, you know, my love affair with hospitality and cooking.
Great. How many of you have been to Cordelia or Rosie? So quite a few folks. For those people who have not been to Cordelia, talk about the atmosphere and what makes that special.
So Cordelia is, we refer to it as modern grandma. It's familiar flavors reimagined, all centered around, you know, our love of Midwestern cuisine and food and how we grew up. You know, in the beginning, when Andrew and I were talking about Cordelia, like, we wanted to create the most quintessential Midwestern restaurant. What did that mean? I have no idea. What we found out what it meant was that we wanted to celebrate our people, our heritage. We both came from different backgrounds. My grandfather, or my grandfather was from South Dakota, on one side, and on the other side from southern Italy. And then my partner's parents were pastors, and they were traveled all over. And his grandmother was from Georgia, so there was no like straight line of like this is what what a quintessential Midwestern restaurant is. But what the continuity was is being, especially from Northeast Ohio, it's like a melting pot of so many cultures and cuisines and just people celebrating people. So that's what we did. We just decided to lean into the people celebrating people, and we get inspired by Eastern European, Italian. We have a great Asia town in Cleveland that we like get inspired from by going out to eat to, and all of a sudden you'll see like a Szechuan pasta on our menu. Like, what does that mean? I don't know. It's a combination of a bunch of different things, like just flavors that we like to celebrate and people we get inspired by. And that's Cordelia. It's just this center of celebratory experience. It's warm, it's inviting, it's pretty rustic when you go in. It just like, looks like, grandma's house in a way. Knickknacks all over the wall. It's got my grandmother's restaurant sign.
Go sit at the kitchen counter
Yeah.
if you can.
It's fun. It's invoking and just like so kind, I guess. And which is a weird thing to say about a restaurant. But it really is. It's just so warm.
You're walking into a friend's house.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my family and I got to visit Rosie about 3 months ago, right after your opening. And I was a little skeptical at first because of the small plate concept, because I'm not a small plate concept kind of guy. But I probably by far one of the best meals I've had this year. Talk about Rosie and what came with that model, and how did you create that? And what's that kind of atmosphere?
So Rosie has always been kind of like a dream. I love cooking over open fire, and really celebrating like such an instinctual way to cook. And it's like so rudimentary, it's so difficult at the same time. We had this opportunity to put an open fire restaurant in this really small space in Ohio City. So as we were thinking about like, what is a follow-up to Cordelia look like, and knowing how much we celebrate our people, our communities, where we're from, we decided to take Rosie like kind of a more deep and meta dive into it all. So, if we're celebrating our grandparents, how we grew up eating, or like, what if Rosie with its open fire like celebrates our grandparents in this very like old world way, So that's where our inspiration comes from. Like I said before, like Northeast Ohio is this melting pot of so many different cultures and cuisines, and we get inspired by so much Eastern European and Northern Italian, Croatian, Slovenian, Slovakian, like this whole region of people here. We just kind of started deep diving into some of these very old world techniques and recipes, and then like making them our own into this fun hip space in Ohio City.
Great. One interesting lunch goer wants to know how managing high food prices, how has that affected your business?
Yeah, everything is going up all the time. I believe beef is up like 300% over the last couple of years. I will say what we do really well is we don't throw anything away. We utilize every single piece. We ferment, we preserve, reserve, cure. We're able to figure out how to turn our discard into things that help us mitigate our loss and help us make more money. And it all kind of evens out. I will say, and this is like a thing that people don't think about. Like, I talk about our farmers all the time and going to the farms, picking up stuff, celebrating them. 2 reasons. A, it's the best ingredient that you can get when you're pulling something straight out of that ground. B, like, I'm also like, there's no middleman. So I don't have to go through somebody else and get something that's more expensive. Like, most people don't understand that it is cheaper for me to go to the farm, pick up these ingredients, and bring them back to my restaurant and cook them. I also don't need to have, these crazy center of the plate type of things. Like, I don't have expensive ingredients on our menu. I make really good food with good ingredients, but none of them are like, overly expensive type of ingredients. I just make good food out of good ingredients.
Great. Besides Vinny Trimino, who is the best chef in our region that no one has ever heard of? So who is the next you that you recommend us trying?
I would say that there are multiple chefs who work within our organization who are way better at cooking than I am. And I'm very fortunate that I get to continue to learn from them every day. Our chef at Cordelia, Adam Bauer, is like just such an inspiration. You know, where he's taken the menu now, Cordelia is a place that I never even dreamt of it being able to go to. You know, we made the groundwork, and he's just been able to, like, you know, take it to a whole nother level. So you guys go into Cordelia now and you're eating food. Like, some of it, yes, is the food that I helped create. A lot of it is what he's creating now and that team is creating. And I can tell you it's better than anything that I cook. So, you know, I appreciate that. You know, and there are so many incredible small restaurants that just don't get the clout that they deserve. You know, one of my favorites here at Akron is the Napoli Kitchen in North Hill. Like, every time I go in there, it's insane. It's so good. You know, every time my wife's like, "Where do you want to eat tonight?" I was like, "Napoli Kitchen." She goes, "Not again." You know, so, but I like it because it's so flavorful and it's just delicious. And, you know, we don't have you know, enough of that culture, which I love. I mean, one of my favorite joints in Cleveland is LJ Shanghai. Like, some of the best Szechuan cuisine I've ever had in my life. And I've traveled a lot. You know, when I find it in other cities, I go, and it's like, I've still, like, you know, the best Szechuan cuisine is in our backyard in Cleveland. Like, that's pretty special kind of thing. So
Please join me in thanking Jason and Vinny.
This has been a production of Akron Roundtable, PBS Western Reserve, the University of Akron, and IdeaStream Public Media.